Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Best Words. Many of you have asked for a video episode, so we are making the transition. I'm here with new partner, special guest, Easy E,
What's up, y'all? How you doing?
and we're going to talk today about a not the Middle East, but another never-ending problem: income inequality. Now, it is fundamentally illogical that the wealthiest nation in the history of the world has municipalities that are broke on every level. It makes no sense. So we're going to look at income inequality, what's driving it, and what can be done about it. E?
Well, yeah. We were talking before about the tax policy and how that really drives most income inequality inside the United States. I was figuring maybe you want to start with that.
Yeah, so it is absolutely possible to erase the federal deficit and to dig every state out of the budget hole that they're in. So I want to start with what is probably the single most egregious thing that has happened to the federal budget, and that is the offshoring of of corporate property. So taxes are booked, profits are booked abroad. So everybody's heard, General Electric pays no taxes, Google pays no taxes, Amazon pays, very few taxes. That is probably the single biggest driver of wealth inequality in this country because wealthy people, by and large, hold shares. And so, how do they accomplish this trick? Well, more profits are booked in Bermuda than in Germany. More profits are booked in Ireland than in China. Uh, and there's a neat little way around this. So they can't just take a liquid asset and move it. So they take illiquid assets. So what do I mean by that? Google has moved all of its intellectual property to Bermuda. So if Google in the United States, Google in France, Google in Germany, they make a lot of revenue, but then they have to pay these massive royalties to Google Bermuda. Uh, and so they don't actually book any profits in the US or Germany or France. Google Bermuda makes all the profits, and Bermuda has no corporate income tax. So, and this is not something that's specific to Google. Like Nike Swoosh is owned by Nike Bermuda, right? Some variant of this is done by every single major multinational company in the world. This alone, by my back of the envelope calculations, costs the federal treasury like $600 to $800 billion a year. So just in sort of multinational shady profit booking. And there's this notion that nothing can be done about it, that there's just this race to the bottom. But I have to actually give the Biden administration some credit because they appear to be taking this very seriously. They are working on a plan to actually coordinate with all the major OECD countries to set a tax floor and to basically freeze out all the bad actors in the system that are there to just kind of let people book profits for free. Your Maltas, your Bermudas, and they're going to be effectively forced to stop that practice. So, and it's a cultural problem, right? I worked on Wall Street. One of my last jobs was in finance, and what got to me was not like the bros who were like, ah, fuck the government, but it was like there's actually a lot of really nice people who work on Wall Street. And there's people who like adopt dogs and are Democrats and all that, but then they would say with a straight face like, "Oh, we're helping people like hide all their estate from the government." And that's what like really fucking bugged me was these people who were otherwise decent who fully bought in to this notion that right all taxes are theft and it's the kind of intellectual and ethical duty of somebody in the who's an accountant or a financial advisor to hide money from the government. And this ideology is fully captured corporate America. It's kind of like cops, right? Like if you're a cop and you want to do the right thing and like not beat the hell out of people, eventually you're going to be frozen out, right? You're going to be ostracized. You're going to be even be punished for trying to punish people breaking the law. Being a corporate accountant is not so different. Like you're either on board with moving everything to Bermuda or you're frozen out. You're not promoted. So we have a fundamental cultural problem in corporate America, and it's also the political class buys it. 100% of Republicans buy it, and 50-60% of Democrats buy it, that it's okay to do this. And it might sound like kind of magical thinking to say fixing this one problem could have huge positive effects on the Treasury balance sheet and state and local balance sheets, but it could.
Yeah, I was reading something a couple of weeks ago in the paper about talking about how the IRS is just really toothless when it comes to, attacking rich people and their taxes versus a middle class person, and just how much more likely you're to be audited, maybe, or if you are audited, how hard they're going to go after you because they know that you can't fight back as hard. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's the second key, right? The first key is like ending shady profit booking. The second key is ending uber wealthy tax evasion. And right now, best estimates are 175 to 200 billion dollars a year are effectively hidden from the government by the super wealthy. So like these two things together, it's about $1 trillion a year in federal taxes that are not getting paid,
hmm
which is more than our deficit was in any year until COVID.
yeah. The deficit hawks should be worrying about this more than the other things that they're worrying about these days, right? Like healthcare,
Yeah.
how much that's going to
Yeah.
cost.
And that's the thing. We can have nice things, right? We can
Of
have
course we can.
healthcare.
We are America. We could do whatever we want to do. Damn straight.
We have more capital, more wealth than any society in the history of the planet, and yet we are told constantly we can't afford shit.
Well, like think about the unemployment benefits, right? That's going on right now. We're super
Yeah, but
worried
nobody
about
will
that.
work in restaurants.
Nobody work in restaurants because nobody wants to get paid $2.13 an hour.
Plus tips.
Plus tips, right? Of course, of course. And it has. Yeah, but back on the taxes thing, you're talking about Biden then having a tax floor, which I think is something that's never talked about, but it's such a good idea. You know, well, think about like corporations like let's say ExxonMobil or something like that. They get tons of subsidy money, right? And they're getting subsidies because they're looking into green energy, right? So what winds up happening is they're technically getting taxed, but at the end, when you factor in all these subsidies, it winds up being a wash, right? So the idea of like a tax floor, like you have to pay this amount of tax no matter what, like it just ends right there. You can't go below that. I think is like a really great idea that's not talked about enough.
Yeah, and you has to be international cooperation. You can't have a race to the bottom. You can't be like, well, we're just going to move to Ireland. Like Ireland, France, Germany, everybody has to be on board. You
Well, yeah,
can't
that's.
just
Oh yeah, you go.
Yeah. No, you can't just park your shit in Luxembourg and pretend you did all your business there. So that's a really neat way to stop this. If Biden can get the international community on board, if Biden can get the international community on board to shady profit booking by multinational companies, I will happily say I wildly underestimated this guy. And it looks like he is really making this something he wants to accomplish and is working to accomplish. Even
Yeah,
the Netherlands seems like receptive to him, and they're one of the companies that lets people book shady profits. So
yeah, true. Well, yeah, I mean, Biden has been pleasantly surprising in some ways. In other ways, I'd say he's been quite disappointing. But it's only been the first couple of months. I'm sure we'll see more as we go on. Um, he's going to run into his problems with Joe Manchin, I'm sure, and Kristen Sinema. Having 50 votes in the Senate is not ideal, but I think that gives a little bit of an excuse of, oh, they're twisting my arm. I can't do anything because they're twisting my arm. And how true that is, it's hard to tell.
yeah, I mean, if they would just push for DC statehood, then Joe Manchin wouldn't be the man who could ruin everything with a temper tantrum.
I think he likes having that amount of power right now. Being the
He
50th vote,
he he loves it. He's the
of
most
course,
important man in the. He's the most powerful man in the world right now.
he's on Fox News every day.
I hate that fucking guy.
Yeah, me too.
Um, so the third prong to income inequality, and again, like the fundamental thesis that I think we have on the show is that all income inequality, almost all of it in this modern world, is derived from tax policy and tax policy failures. And the last one is just hugely increasing taxes on the super rich in this country. The richest families in the country pay an effective tax rate of like 24%. Um, the average American pays about 28%. It's just criminal. So the wealth tax is a great idea. I think we need to implement yesterday. We need to quintuple the estate tax. I mean,
You mean the death tax?
I refuse to call it that. Uh, it'll always be the estate tax to me. I have no problem with a generous estate tax cutoff, right?
Yeah.
Like even like a couple $1 million, fine. Or
Well,
if it's like a business where the functionality or continuous ownership of the business would be threatened by the tax bill. I
yeah.
don't care if they want to amortize that or whatever.
Well, obviously, if you're dealing with a business, like millions of dollars can not be a lot of money if you're talking about a huge business with a lot of employees or something like that. Two individuals though, or a family unit, husband, wife, whatever. That's a huge sum of money for anybody. I don't care
Yeah.
where you live in this country. A couple $1 million is a lot of money. Um, but
So if
yeah,
you got 20 million, if grandpa dies, you get 20 million. Like you better pay. The Republicans don't want anyone to pay taxes on that money, and that's obscene.
well, the way that I always looked at it is, okay, the person dies, they leave it to their family, whatever. That's not the money that you're receiving as the recipient of, the estate. That's income. That's income. What else is that? You did not work for that money. What would be good for economic activity? Um, but also not creating this hierarchy, like this aristocracy that just passes down money until their great 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 grandchildren, still don't have to work a day in their life.
Yeah, I mean that shit should be like Jeff Bezos is trying to get like a pity party going because his heirs will like have to pay 50 billion in taxes or some shit. It's like it should be 6 7 times higher than that. Like the fact that they're left with a number that starts with a B, too much.
The
That
existence
should
of
be like
billionaires is a failure of good tax policy.
yes,
I'll say it
sort of.
here. Sort of.
You're getting into some like base 10 biases and sort of like there's no real magical reason. We just put a comma there and added an extra digit at a billion. And it's kind of arbitrary and the value of a
Yeah.
billion
It's
changes
more
over
it's more
time,
of
but
a feelings over facts thing right there.
yeah.
I think it's a
But
good
there
it's a good message
it is a good message. You heard it here first.
if
The
you're on our side.
existence of
It's a good message if you're on our side.
our side is popular. That's the thing. Like you go to like these people, um,
QAnon?
QAnon people, they're all Democrats on tax policy. They're all Democrats on the minimum wage. Like we are on the right side of history politically, and our side is just like really terrible at branding. I mean, if you look at like Florida, right, you had 61% of the people in Florida in the 2020 presidential election voted to raise the minimum wage.
Yeah. No, yeah,
51% of them voted for fucking Trump, which means you got 12% of that fucking state who are Trump voters who wanted to raise the minimum wage.
I
You had like,
specifically remember that as I was paying attention to the election, Um there is that weird divide. There's the Republican union supporting group that kind of gets overlooked sometimes. And I don't quite know how to take that ever, because you see these people, they're voting for Trump, and then they'll put on their ballot or their initiative or whatever they have that they want taxes raised. It's hard to determine, like, okay, but what's most important to you? Maybe they want that, but do they care more about immigration? Do they care more about the abortion issue? And gauging that is difficult. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, like the infrastructure bill, right? If you tell people we're going to spend 3 trillion on infrastructure, they say great, 56% or something like that. If you tell them we're going to raise taxes on the super wealthy to pay for infrastructure, it's more popular, not less popular.
Yeah.
Tax cuts on the tax increasing taxes on the wealthy polls well across the political spectrum. But yes, like identity is the most powerful psychological force in the world. Hatred of immigrants, hatred of whoever, and love of religion, and apparently hatred of vaccines is more powerful than your tax policy preferences.
I think it's getting them to the point where that's their top priority. Something like healthcare or tax policy.
I think like it really blows my mind that we haven't somehow coerced the business community into leading the charge for Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Like say you run like a mid-sized construction company, right? You got 40, $50 million a year in revenue. The fuck do you have to worry about people's health care for? That's insane. Why should that be part of your job?
It's more of a burden than anything.
Yeah.
Small businesses, especially.
Well, yeah. So a couple more points about the income inequality, though. I'm sorry about tax policy. Is like look at okay bridges, right? We're here in New York. We can't raise taxes on the wealthy, they say, but meanwhile they had to shut down the Tappan Zee Bridge. Just last week in Memphis, Tennessee, there's a bridge that connects Memphis, Tennessee to Arkansas. They had to close it for 2 months. Fundamentally broken structure, can't hold, but they can't raise taxes. Um, and so income inequality, it's really not about um, how much people in the middle and the bottom are making per se. It's about stratospheric wealth not being accumulated at the top. And because the knock-on effects for people's lives are if that money was going to municipalities, people wouldn't have to get bled to go to the doctor. People wouldn't have to get bled to pay for insulin. People wouldn't have to get bled to pay for tuition. Um, People wouldn't have to get bled to pay for public transit. Like you name it. We could actually pay for all these things. People's wages wouldn't have to actually change that much. If you didn't have this stratospheric wealth accumulation at the top, we could have a lot more public goods and people's actual income wouldn't actually need to go up that much to have a higher quality of living. So you look at like the city of Chicago. I mean, I love that place, but they sold their parking rights to a private equity firm, right? So you used to be able to pay whatever it was to park, and you had like weekends off and holidays off. Not anymore. Not anymore. It costs twice as much to park, and there's no breaks, no holidays, nothing. So there's all these little things. Like if you could prevent private equity companies from accumulating all this wealth and other people from accumulating all this wealth and tax them, you could have a government that actually funds the necessities of people's lives. And it wouldn't, and not saying we couldn't use more money and higher wages, but we could actually improve people's quality of life a lot just by preventing this hoarding of wealth at the top.
No, I totally agree. Well, it's like you were saying before, the left just sucks at messaging. The thing, how do we get people on board with this stuff? Because you're saying. I mean, most people are on our side. That's not the difficult thing. It's when people like Frank Luntz or uh, the Republicans set up focus groups, figure out what language to use to confuse people or muddy the waters on any issue, income inequality too, but anything that we were talking about before. How do we get them to understand better, our message versus the smear machine? And that's the tough part.
I mean, I think we're learning. I think we're learning.
Well, I think people,
Uh,
I think a lot of people woke up, during Donald Trump's reign. I think that happened for sure. You saw, I mean, how many people voted in the last election? I never thought I'd see turnout over 65%.
mhm.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you're definitely right about that. But yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, wages going up is terrific, but and something we need to see more of, and something we are seeing more of. People who are making two, three, four, seven, $12 an hour in some places are like, no, screw it. Like you got to pay me 15 or more. And so workers are waking up culturally. Uh, but again, this actually all goes back to tax policy, right? Because if you are taxing stratospheric wealth gains, you're taxing profits on corporate profits, there's actually you change the incentive matrix to pay higher wages. If you can extract this wealth out of your company and keep 100% of it, you're going to do that. But if it's going to be taxed, you may as well reinvest it and you may as well pay higher wages.
Yeah,
So I think
that is one thing that people avoid a lot. I was having a discussion with somebody a while back, and they're saying that it was ridiculous that if you taxed a business, or you taxed a person who owns the business more if they take that money out of it, as their wage, that if you raise taxes, they wouldn't put it back in the business. But that doesn't make any sense. Of course, they're going to put it back in the business. You're saving money
yeah,
on
we're also,
taxes. So it's okay. Maybe you're not getting the tax money that you wanted if you're raising taxes, but at least the money is going back into the businesses. And hopefully, I don't want to say the words trickling down, but Getting to the workers in some way. But yeah, I mean, I hear you on that point.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we only have like decades of history in this country to prove it works.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
we had 80, 90% highest marginal tax rate in this country for a long time. And most people didn't pay it. Like five families
Yeah.
paid it.
The nominal rate, of course, was a lot higher. The actual rate that was being paid was still higher than it is today. I mean, you'll talk to like these libertarian types, like Peter Schiff or some, people like that, and they're like, "Oh, they didn't pay those taxes. That was nothing. It was about the same." It actually wasn't. It was the effective rate was over 50%, even if the nominal rate was around 80, 90%. So
Yeah, and it was reinvested in wages, which brings us back full circle. All income inequality ultimately derives from smart tax policy.
absolutely, there's like one. I think individual taxes on just wage earners is something that's not understood very well in this country. Like how our progressive tax system works, and I think that that's one big barrier that um, prevents people from seeing our side. I think more.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty astute.
Well, yeah, I don't think that a lot of people actually know how their taxes work. So
No, and they also don't know what the hell they get for them, right? And like, there's this notion that taxes are theft, and like nothing pisses me off more than somebody like the internet was developed with government money, like insulin shots are developed with government money, like you name it.
NASA.
The- NASA was got the highways. Right? We've subsidized the entire suburban way of life was through the Department of Transportation subsidies. And then they have the nerve to say, well, taxation is theft or it's just going to some fucking family on welfare. And it's like, you ignorant asswipe. No.
Well, that's the thing. Divide and conquer, right? Put it on the
Yeah.
other. Make it somebody that they don't hate or that they don't like personally. Create this character, and then make them believe that all the problems are coming from that thing. But I think people are starting to wake up to that. Thank you, Zoomers.
They are a radical generation. My dream is to be like seen as a radical leader and then to be uh, assassinated by my followers when they think I'm a sellout.
You want to be kind of like a martyr. You
Yeah,
don't.
more
You don't
like
want to.
a
Yeah. You don't want to live too long to see yourself become the villain. Is what you're saying.
yeah. Also, like I'll be a sellout. Like you throw endorsement money my way, I'm in.
All right, Jimmy Dore.
Oh,
I don't
that
know.
burned.
Yeah, that was a sick burn.